So now we've reached the point where we're ready to begin play, and one of the things that I really like about this game is that the board leads you through basically everything you could need to know. There's even some more information stashed over here on the airbase sheet that I've just hidden to get everything on camera. But at the start of the day, you're going to draw a special condition card. And the special condition cards are, as we know, right here. So let's just see what our special condition is for today. So we got satellite recon data. Increase your loiter turns over the battlefields by 1. So the base loiter turns start at 5, but we're up to 6, which is pretty awesome. So loitering is basically how many times, how many turns you can spend hanging out, destroying things before you have to go home or you start running out of fuel. So having a lot of loiter time is great. So now we're going to allocate points and aircraft. What that basically is going to mean is that we now get to choose which pilots we're going to send out, with which of their aircraft, and in what combinations, and against which battalions. So this game has a lot of decision making that happens before you begin official gameplay on the board, and that's what we're working on right now. So now I've decided which battalions I'd like to go after today. I want to attack 9A because I don't like that you add 2 to this battalion's move rolls. That bothers me. There's also Artillery Unit 1S, which causes you to lose 2 SO points at the end of each day. It's also worth 6 experience points, which is pretty massive. So if I can knock this thing out, I can quit losing so many SO points at the end of every day. Those are pretty valuable. And you're going to see what I'm going to do with the rest of them when I choose weapons for these aircraft. What I've decided, however, is that we're going to start easy with these 2 aircraft coming after 4 APCs, 4 tanks, and 4 trucks with a fast assault. So I'm going to send Shadow and his Apache there, and I'm also going to send Scuttle and his Cobra over there. Over here against the artillery unit, we have Pirate with the Thunderbolt, Judge in an Apache, and Freak in a Cobra. So now that I've got my pilots and my airplanes chosen, I'm going to choose weapons. But before that, there's one more note I want to make with you guys, which is that even though I promoted some of my pilots, I wanted a mixture of skilled and average pilots in here because you want all of your pilots to keep growing in experience. If you use up all of your skilled pilots right away, they may get stressed and then you have a mission where you don't have somebody who's really experienced to go with everyone else. So your pilots are going to gain experience and they're going to level up over the course of a campaign. However, you also have to pay attention to their stress levels, which can temporarily take them out of the game. And even worse, if you put all of your effort into a couple of really good pilots, they can still be killed in battle, and then you've lost your best guy and you haven't been developing the others. So it definitely has like a campaign RPG kind of feel where you have to make sure that your pilots grow together in a balanced way. I've also, you might have noticed, allocated 1 scout per battalion, and the scouts are going to play a role in determining whether we get some extra loiter turns when it's time to go to battle. So now I have my first mission all set up. We'd already drawn our special event, but now we've officially got 9A over here in the target space, and our aircraft not only have pilots assigned, but they also now have weapons assigned to them. So let's give a quick overview of how I chose those weapons so that you can do it too. So one thing that I made a choice about is that I only put 1 air-to-air weapon on each of my planes, those are the ones with the yellow stripe, because I'm planning to mostly attack things on the ground. It's possible that I'm going to get some pop-up helicopters and regret my choices, but we'll deal with it when we get there. The other thing to know is that there are weapons limits that are determined in 2 ways. One is by the weight limit on each of your aircraft. The other is by the amount of special options points you have and want to spend. On every single weapon counter, that top left number, the one that's got, it's like a white number with a black background, that's the weight of the missile. And then this one right here that's a little bit further in, that is the number of ordnance points it costs. These ordnance points are important because they determine how many special options points your weapons are going to cost you. Basically, 10 or fewer ordnance points will cost you 1 special options point. If you go over 10, it's going to cost you 2. So if I have 8 ordnance points worth of missiles, it's going to be 1 special options point. If I have 11, it's over 10, so it's going to be 2. Other interesting things are, so this top 3, that's the die roll that you need to meet or exceed for the hit to be a success. The 3 that's on a black circular background is the range of the weapon, and the H and the L mean that it can be fired at both high and low altitudes. And every weapon is going to have a set of numbers like this that tell you its stats. So now that I have done my allocating pilots and aircraft, I've allocated my scouts, I skipped the abort mission option, and I've armed my aircraft, it's time for a target-bound mission event. And if I had engine damage, I would need to check. So you could basically fly your planes until things are starting to fall apart, which I don't recommend, but if I had engine damage now, I still could have flown my plane out. I would just have to make sure I wasn't gonna crash. So let's grab our target bound mission event, which will be here on the mission event cards. So our target bound mission event says, you may pay 1 SO point to destroy all helicopters and ignore all pop-up helicopters during the mission. Oh, well, that's awesome. I didn't have to get any helicopter missiles at all. So those ones with the yellow stripe that I had that were air to air, don't even need them. Bummer, but at the same time, good not to get chased around by helicopters. All right, so now I'm gonna place terrain hexes and show you how that part works. Terrain is actually super easy to deal with in this game. There's just gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hexes. Just pretend they're all numbered dead. You shuffle the terrain tiles and then you just lay them out. There's also arrows. You make sure the arrows here are pointing to the top. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, and so on. All right, so now our terrain is laid out, and we're gonna place all the little enemy units that came with our battalion, which means that we're gonna place 4 APCs, 4 tanks, and 4 trucks. Let me get the chits for those now. All right, so my counters are out, and then to place them, all you do is roll a d10, and for each of them, and then put it on the hex that you get a number for. So this is a 6. This tank will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you just roll for each one. So let me do that and we'll come back. So now I've placed all the enemies out and I've then placed friendly aircrafts. So unless you're a helicopter that's hovering, when you move into a hex, you need to move up to the border of the hex that represents the direction you're going to go to next. So both of my pilots, when they move, are gonna move into this hex, and that is the intention. When you place your friendly aircraft, however, just so you know, you can pretty much come in off of any of the edges of the board, and that part is up to you. So we placed our friendly aircraft, and now we're gonna do a scout success check. There is a scout on this battalion, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna roll, and whatever the scout roll tells us, we're gonna get a little bonus, or we'll lose our scout, depending. Ooh, okay, so that was nice. We rolled a 9. So what that means is that we get +4 turns and we get -1 stress, which is pretty fantastic. So that puts our loiter 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 10. Our starting value is 5. We got 1 from the card, and then we got 4 from a really nice scout roll. So now the scout comes back to us for use on another day, and that is really good news. All right, so now let's see how we do this round. It is time for gameplay to begin in earnest. So we've placed our loiter counter. That ends the target bound phase of the mission. So now we're going to battlefield resolution, and that's going to continue until we leave the field. So we've come in at low altitude. So what that means is that here, when it says draw pop-up counters, we can ignore that. However, if we had someone in high altitude, as noted by this red H at the bottom of the counter, then we would have to draw a pop-up enemy for every pilot on the field that was like that. Low altitude also affects your line of sight, so you might have noticed that some of these tiles for terrain have ridges. If you're in low altitude, you cannot shoot someone over a ridge because it's blocking your line of sight. You'll have to go into high altitude if you want to do something about it. The other thing about high altitude, however, is it makes it easier for your enemies to shoot at you if you enter their line of sight, so it's worth thinking about. Fortunately, none of these enemies have any range. If they did, it would be in the little black circle, like on this counter. All right, so we don't have to draw any pop-up counters. Now it's time for the enemy cover roll. And what happens on the enemy cover roll is enemies that can get to a ridge and go into cover will do so, depending on what you roll. So we're gonna roll a d10, and we will see what we get. So this time we rolled a 7, and that means 1 random hex. So let's see what hex it will be. It'll be hex 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this tank is going to hide out in cover. And basically what that means is we have to be on the same hex as the tank in order to shoot it. So that's the enemy cover roll resolved. Now if we had fast pilots, it would be their turn to move, attack, and adjust their altitude in order of their choosing. However, both of our pilots are slow. You can actually see on the card right up here the speed of the pilot. So slow pilots basically get to move after the enemy does. In this case, the enemies aren't going to do anything because they don't have enough range to attack us 1 hex over. They could attack us if we were in the same hex as an enemy, but since we aren't, they can't. So this didn't happen. Enemy attacks don't happen. Now it's time for slow pilots to adjust altitude and move/attack. So let's go ahead and get down to business. Let's go ahead and start with Shadow. Shadow is going to come here. So that's his move of 1. Because Shadow is piloting an Apache, what that means is that he's going to get to either go 0, which means that he chooses to hover, or 1 on a given turn, which if he's hovering, the 1 movement is going to the edge of the tile to decide where to move next. But in this case, he's moved 1 hex, and next turn we'll move another hex. Clearly, I'm feeling optimistic about my shots here. This could be a mistake. So now that Shadow has moved, he's going to attack. You can attack before you move, attack, move. You can do as you like in terms of the order, as long as you stay within your movement range and only attack the number of times that you're supposed to. So now that Shadow is within range of this truck and this tank, we're going to go ahead and unload and see how it goes. We're going to drop our AGM 114s first. So we're going to say that I'm going to fire 1 at this truck and 1 at this tank. Note that the truck and the tank have different modifiers for my die roll. The truck gives me +2 to my roll, so I only have to roll a 2 in order to be successful. The tank gives me a -2 to my roll, and that means that I'm going to have to roll a 6 or better to hit it. So let's take a shot at the truck first and see how it goes. Oh wow, okay, well that was overkill. So I rolled an 8. The +2 will give me 10, and then on every pilot's card, what you have is you have some different modifiers. So here, my strike stat, which is when I hit someone either with my cannons or in the same hex, is a +1. If I'm doing a standoff, which means that I'm firing at range, as I'm doing right now, that's also a +1. So that truck is extremely dead. And good riddance. So I lose my missile, but I did destroy the truck. Now we're going to roll for the tank. We can only hope for the luck that we had in this last roll. Actually, we got it. We got a 10. Dang. All right, that was a lucky first roll. That does not always happen in this game. All right, so that means that this tank is now destroyed as well. And this missile is gone. So that was Shadow's entire turn. We've moved, we've fired, it was good. So probably what's going to happen next is I would like to maybe come in here and hover and fire at these and then fire at these. That's the plan for Shadow, but we'll see how things actually go. I'm going to send Scuttle flying around this way to see if we can tag team these enemies. So now it's Scuttle's turn. He's also a slow pilot. He, however, is piloting a different kind of aircraft and can move 1 or 2 in his A10. So I can go 1 like this and fire at range, or I can go 1, 2 and come here, or I could go 1, 2, but I have to move 1 or 2. I can't hover the way that Shadow can. So let's see what Scuttle might like to do. I think I'm going to send Scuttle this way for just 1, and we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to go ahead and fire at these 2 vehicles, but we're going to fire 1 of our AGM 114s, which we had done before. Let's go with this one. We'll fire that one at the tank. And then we're going to fire this LAU-61 at the APC. So this is the same missile that we fired last time. Well, you can't fire it from within the same hex, so you have to fire it at range, which is why I've chosen to do that already. And also, you have a range of up to 2, so we can certainly fire it 1 hex over into here. However, this one's a little bit special. If you look very closely at it, you'll see a 4 and then a 7 in parentheses. And what that means is that if we can roll a 7 or better, or because we have +1 to our standoff on Scuttle, a 6 or better, then we actually get to keep that weapon and use it again, which is why I gave 2 LAU-61s to each of my pilots in the hopes that we could do some serious damage before we ran out of missiles and had to use our cannons. So let's go ahead and roll for Scuttle. Scuttle needs to roll a 3 or better in order to hit this APC. He needs to roll a 6 or better to keep the weapon. But let's do that one second, actually. Here, I need to roll a 6 or better to get that tank. All right, so let's see how we roll. Oh yes, another 10. So we absolutely got that tank. Thank goodness for that. This missile is gone, so I've been spending all my weapons here. And then let's see if we can keep this one. I'm pretty sure I could destroy the APC, but can we keep it? We cannot. So we rolled the 4, but we didn't get the 7. So we lost this LAU, which stinks, but it's better than it could have been. So that was Scuttle's turn, and now he's gone. Now what's going to happen is we're going to advance the loiter counter. And we're going to go through this battle resolution again. So we're both still in low altitude. That means there are going to be no pop-ups. We can do an enemy cover roll and kind of see what happens with that. So now, because we rolled a 4, what that's going to mean is that anyone with a destroyed unit in their hex would go to cover. But the thing is that there's all the units in these hexes are destroyed. Nobody else is going to go to cover. So that part is all well and good. All right, so none of the enemies went to cover. Now, if we had a fast pilot, they would go, but we don't. So it's going to be enemy attacks. Once again, these enemies do not have any range, and we're not in range of anyone that could actually get us, so we get to enjoy sweet relief and not be shot by the enemy. So now let's say that it's Shadow's turn again. We're going to move into slow attacks for our pilots. So this truck and tank are gone. Let's say that Shadow's going to come in here and hover. This is a very good place to hover because Shadow can shoot in several different directions, which I think seems like a good plan for him. So now here's what Shadow will do. Let's go ahead and fire over here into this hex. I like that plan. So what Shadow's going to do is we're going to fire this AGM at the APC. And we're going to take this LAU-61 and we're going to fire it at the truck because of that +2. So we have a much easier hit, which gives us a higher chance of keeping our weapon. All right, so let's take our first shot at that APC and hope that we get a 3 or better because once again, we have a +1 to standoff when we use Shadow. All right, so we rolled a 5. That is going to be enough to say goodbye to this weapon, but the APC is destroyed. Now, what we are hoping for, so this truck is a +2 and I get a +1 for my bonus to standoff. So what that's going to mean is that I get a +3 to my roll. In other words, I need to get a 4 or better to keep my weapon. So let's hope that it happens. And I did it. So I got a 4, 5, 6, 7. So this truck is destroyed, but more importantly, I get to keep this weapon and use it again, which means that I'm going to be able to keep shooting. It's great. So now Scuttle is in a little bit of a bind. So when I initially placed my aircraft, I was hoping that this guy would stay out of cover so that I could, shoot him. So Scuttle has an option to move 1 or 2, but he's not in the best shape to get at this tank until he's in this hex. So he's kind of wasting a loiter turn. Fortunately, I have a bunch of time, so I can afford to let that be, but typically you want to try to kill something on every single turn. However, Scuttle's going to come like this. 1, he's going to move. 2. He would be able to throw his LAU-61 in here against this tank, but he cannot because the tank is in cover. So I have to wait until I'm in the same space with this tank before I can shoot it. I could have gone into high altitude perhaps, but cover is still cover. My other option would have been to go into high altitude and fire into here, which maybe would have been okay, but it would have attracted some pop-up enemies, and that's not exactly the best either. Although, the good news is that I do get to ignore all pop-up helicopters during that mission, so maybe that would be an okay plan. Let me think about that. So Scuttle was here. The question is, do I want to pop up into high altitude to come at these guys? That might actually be a cool idea, especially if I can fire my LAU at this truck, keep it, come in here, shoot, and then let Shadow keep dealing with some of this other stuff. You know what? We're going to do it. You should see how pop-up stuff works anyway. We're going to go into high altitude. We're going to go 1, 2. So now that I'm in high altitude, I can shoot over the ridge. Of course, if they had range, they could also shoot me, but they can't. Ha ha ha. So we're going to shoot into here, and we're going to go for this truck. I'm going to shoot my LAU-61 at the truck because I have a +1 for standoff on Scuttle and a +2 on the truck to my roll, which means that if I can hit a 4 or better, I'm going to keep my weapon and be able to fire it again another day. And fantastic, we got a 10. So I get to definitely keep my weapon. This truck is definitely dead. And I feel like that was more progress on this turn than I would have made otherwise. Good stuff. All right, so now we're going to advance the loiter counter again. So now we've reached the top of the battlefield resolution phase, and we're going to draw pop-up counters. So basically, to play this game, you do need a cup. Mine is just off to the side. And you reach into your cup and you grab a pop-up. Sometimes it's something horrible, sometimes it says no enemy on it, sometimes it's a helicopter. There's all kinds of things that it could be. All right, so here's my pop-up that I drew. And happily for me, it is a helicopter, which according to the mission condition, I'm allowed to ignore. If I couldn't ignore it, I would roll my D10 again and figure out which hex to put it on. But as it stands, goodbye helicopter. That was a fortunate pop-up phase. And of course the pop-up happened because Scuttle over here is in high altitude right now. So now we're gonna do an enemy cover roll. All right, so this time we got a 2. So anyone who's in the same hex with an aircraft would go into cover. However, none of the enemies that are still alive, haha, are in the same hex with an aircraft. So that's not going to happen. Now we're gonna move into fast attacks, which we're not gonna do. And then enemy attacks, which can't happen because none of these guys have range. So now it's back to us. So part of this game is choosing strategically where to move and how to pace to keep the enemy from shooting at you. Somebody's gonna get shot at some point before the end of this mission, but I'm trying to take advantage of tempo and movement and odds on my die, right, to make me have a higher chance of success. There are gonna be games of this where you have horrible rolls, but honestly, in Thunderbolt-Apache Leader, good planning is really most of the work. So sitting there and thinking about what weapons to put on your planes and helicopters and figuring out what kind of fast and slow movements you want, what hex to come in on, what order to attack in. Those are really, for me, the most exciting parts of the game and where the biggest successes are going to come from. All right, so let's go back to Shadow. Shadow is hanging out over here and he can just fire right in. So there's a ridge here. So if I were here, I could not, but I'm in low altitude with a lovely line of sight over into this hex and I'm going to take full advantage. So I think what Shadow's gonna do is he's gonna go ahead and fire both of his LAU 61s into here because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get to keep that one as long as I roll a 4 or better. And then here, I'm going to have a shot at least. I might lose that weapon, but it's worth a try. So let's say that I'm rolling for this one first, the harder one. Ooh, another 10. Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, so I'm keeping my weapon. And this is destroyed. I do so love to hover. All right, so now we're going to go for this truck. It has a big modifier, so if I can roll a 4 or better, I'm keeping my weapon. And again, a 10. This is like the luckiest game of this I've ever played. That means the next mission is gonna be horrible. All right, so I do get to keep this weapon. And this truck is out. So what that means is that, by the way, we are getting really down to the wire in terms of destroying this, this battalion. If you look over here at the battalion card, you'll see the numbers 10/2. 10 is the number of points it needs to be under in terms of like the values of all the vehicles in order to be considered at half strength, in which case you'd have to attack it again, but with half the enemies. If I can get it down to 2, which means only 1 tank left essentially, then I will consider the battalion destroyed and be able to go home. So what I need to do is Scuttle needs to destroy this truck. And then either Shadow or Scuttle needs to take out one of these tanks and we can call it a day. So I think what we're gonna do is it's Scuttle's turn. I'm gonna have him move in here so we can kind of circle around and make sure that this tank dies, in which case we can leave, which is pretty great. So I'm gonna go ahead and fire at this APC. The question is, well, my cannon is not great. So I'm gonna hope that my LAU works out and probably lose it because every card has a cannon value as well, but this cannon value is a 9, which means that if I'm gonna try to shoot something in the same hex with a cannon, it isn't gonna work out so hot. And I don't wanna get attacked this turn. So let's go ahead and fire the LAU at the APC. Okay, well I got a 4 plus 1 for my modifier, which is a 5, but I lose my weapon. So my weapon is gone. But the APC is destroyed. So what's probably gonna happen now is Scuttle is going to kind of exit the field and we're gonna have to leave Shadow to try to deal with the tank. Hopefully he's gonna be able to do it. But for now, we're gonna circle back around for battlefield resolution. So we've gone down another turn, so our loiter counter goes down. And now we're gonna draw pop-ups. I forgot to move Scuttle back down. So that is my own fault, and we're gonna draw a pop-up. All right, so here's our pop-up. It is an APC, so let's have a look at it. All right, so the pop-up we drew is an APC. You can tell it's a pop-up by this little top red spot in the corner. And this one does 2 heavy damage. Yellow is light damage, red is heavy, but it only has a range of 1. So now we're going to place it somewhere on here based on a die roll and hope for the best. All right, so it's going to go on hex number 6. So that means that it is serious danger to Scuttle, but Shadow is okay. So Scuttle needs to run to get out of here. All right, so we've drawn our pop-up counters. Let's do our enemy cover roll and see what we get. Okay, a 4. So if something were in a space with a destroyed unit, it would hide. Fortunately, this isn't, so that's the only thing that we have to hit in order to get out of here. These don't count. These pop-ups don't actually count against victory points or against battalion destruction or anything. They're just there to annoy you. So we are, in effect, just going to ignore this and get the heck out of Dodge. All right, so we don't have any fast pilots. We do now have enemy attacks. And the unfortunate thing is we're going to have an attack because Scuttle, you didn't get out of your high altitude and someone saw you, so you're going to get shot. So now this APC has appeared. And so now it's going to shoot at Scuttle. So this thing has a range of 1. It cannot get all the way over to Shadow. It does have a range of 1 and can shoot Scuttle. If he were in low altitude, it could not because of this ridge blocking line of sight. But because Scuttle is in high altitude, the fool, he's going to take 2 heavy damage counters. Again, you need another cup for these. I'll take a couple out just to show you before I draw. So every damage counter in this game has 2 sides. So the yellow side is for light damage and the red is for heavy. So we're going to have to draw 2 of the red ones and see what happens to our plane. All right, so our first heavy damage for Scuttle says altitude. And basically what altitude does is it makes you change whatever altitude that you were in. So that means that Scuttle is automatically going to switch to low altitude. However, here's what I'm not sure about. So he immediately changed altitude. If we were over a ridge, I would have to roll for ridge damage because you can fly at low altitude over a ridge if you want to, but it hurts your pilot and your plane. So he was in the middle of taking damage when I did this. Does that mean that he doesn't take the second one because he dropped out of sight before the second shot? I don't actually know. I'm having a look at the rulebook and it's not obvious to me. So here's what I'm going to do. We're just going to assume the worst and that I get hit a second time. But he had to change altitude. And then I picked up some bullet holes. Bullet holes could be a lot worse. I will take it. So once you get bullet holes, the counter for your damage actually goes back into the cup. And now I'm looking through my counter tray for bullet holes. Here we go. So what happens then is that you put bullet holes on the card that shows your aircraft and just leave it there so that when you go back, you can record that damage. Okay, so Scuttle fortunately survived the really annoying attack from the APC. Thank goodness. It wasn't great, but it could have been a lot worse. So now Scuttle he could be up. So enemy attacks have happened. Now we're at slow altitude and move and attack. Okay. So let's go ahead and move Scuttle 1, 2, and he's going to move off the board on this next loiter turn. He's headed home. You don't actually have to leave through the same hex you came in on, although that's happening this time. You can just go through any hex that seems convenient. Now Shadow is up. I'm going to stay in hover and see if I can move next turn or not. What I need to do is fire both of my LAUs at this tank and hope that one will hit. I only need a hit. So what that's going to mean is that this has a -2 to each shot, so I need to get a 6, but minus a 1 because I have a +1 to my standoff. So I need to roll a 5 or better on one of 2 die rolls in order to get this. Okay, so that was a 3. That did not happen. So let's say that this LAU is gone. Come on. 6. All right. That is fantastic. So this LAU gets lost, but that is okay. The tank is destroyed. And now Shadow is moving out of hover to the edge of the hex because that is his 1 movement. So we're just going to leave this tank in here and alive because we've done enough to destroy the battalion. I am cool with this. So now let's get back through. Everybody's on low altitude, so there won't be any more pop-up counters. We could do an enemy cover roll. It doesn't really matter. This guy can't go to cover, so nothing would have happened anyway. Fast pilots, we don't have any. enemy attacks, there won't be any. And then for slow, Shadow's gonna, oh, we should have moved that loader counter down, by the way. So for slow movement pilots, so Scuttle's gonna come off the board. He's home. Shadow is gonna come to the edge, but really we could go through all these steps and nothing would happen. Move the loader down 1, Shadow comes out. So that was a very successful flight. Everybody made it off the map with plenty of turns left. Good stuff. So now we're going to go through the homebound housekeeping aspect of things. So the first thing we're going to do is adjust the battalion strength counter. So if we don't need to partially destroy this battalion, we would just flip it down like this to half, but it actually leaves the board because we murdered it. Fantastic. So this card goes off to the side, and that's going to be 3 victory points for our pilots. Fantastic. Now we're going to do a homebound mission event. So we're going to move this card off to discard, and we'll flip another one. So we looked at the top one on the way out. You look at the bottom on the way in. So this says you may freely repair 1 damage on each aircraft returning from the mission. That's actually awesome because I can freely repair the bullet holes. Excellent. We'll do bingo fuel checks. Basically, bingo fuel checks are if you're kind of overstaying your turns in a mission, you have to roll for stress for your pilot when you get back. So you roll a die and it's automatically a base value of 6 or a base value of 10, depending on which bingo you came home on. Then you do a crash pilot search and rescue check. We didn't have anybody crash this time, thankfully. We record our pilot's stress and experience, and then we record our VPs. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. So here's our little spreadsheet, and the first thing that let's go ahead and do is assign experience to our pilots. Or actually, let's follow the homebound order. Let's do record pilot stress. So the battalion that we attacked was here in the front line, which means that each pilot's going to get 1 stress. However, if you recall, our scout roll was a 9, which means that we get to subtract 1 stress. So the pilots are actually not going to take on any additional stress this time, which is awesome. Now we're going to do experience points. So basically the way this works is that unless the battalion card gives you a bonus, every pilot who flies the mission gets 1 point of experience. If the battalion is destroyed on that mission that you flew, everybody gets 1 more point. And if you destroyed every single battalion unit, that would be a 3rd point. So both Shadow and Scuttle flew the mission, so they get 1 point. And the battalion was destroyed, so they each get 1 more point, but they don't get that 3rd point because we left that 1 tank still standing at the end. Experience points. 2 for Shadow, 2 for Scuttle. Now we're going to record victory points, which is pretty awesome because it's 3. So we got 3 victory points. So here's where we're recording the mission. So on day 1, we went against 9A. We had 4 SO points at the start of the mission, and we subtracted 1 for our munitions. We didn't subtract anything for any other ones. We didn't get any daily points yet because it's not the start of a day. We're not going to actually have to repair because on maintenance priority on our return card, we had you may freely repair 1 damage on each aircraft returning from the mission. So rather than record damage here by putting bullet holes on the log for this plane or spending SO points to repair it, I can actually just remove it, which is pretty great. So we don't have to deal with any daily SO points yet. We don't spend any on repairs. And then for our target status, X is for destroyed, 1/2 is for half, and F is for full. We get to put a nice fat X for destroyed, and no VPs were lost. So that was a very good first mission. So then what we would do is we'd fly our second mission of the day, and then actually do the daily SO points and end of day stuff. But the end of the day has not yet occurred in the game.